President Muhammadu Buhari is urging the new national chairman of the All Progressive Congress to be fair and firm in the discharge of his duties. President Buhari gave the charge when he received Senator Buhari Adamu at the State House, where he pledged commitments to entrenching democratic principles in the nation's politics and governance. It was the first official visit after it was adopted as the consensus candidate of the National Convention of the party on March 26.
I came with my predecessor to come and touch base with the president and to, with gratitude, inform him that we have fully handed over. I'm in charge of this party, and by the grace of God, we will be honest. We will take the trust that is thrust on us with every seriousness and every sense of patriotism. There isn't much I will tell the public at this point in time, but the president, as the head of this party, we owe him a duty to say, as of this today, 7th, 8th day since I was taken over, this is how far we've gone. These are things we are doing. You know, our preparations for the forthcoming election.
I'm feeling fulfilled, especially having conducted a Ranko-free seamless convention that ushered in the new leadership. And I am happy with the leadership. And the party is more stronger, united now than ever before.
Right, Tuli, your views on this?
Well, I think it's the calm after the storm for the APC. After the convention was held, we all remember the lead up to that, and it was finally held. They pulled it off, not without some public appeasement and not without some tears and upset, but they did pull it off. However, that calm should not be short-lived. We certainly hope that it's not. We certainly hope that going into the presidential primaries, which is crucial, that we don't see any more of those fault lines widening, although chance would be a fine thing. We probably will see that. APC has come out to debunk claims that their schedule for primaries has been made public. They've denied that report that's been circulated. I'm sure you saw that. But we do know, according to INEC, that June 3rd is the deadline for all those primaries to be held. So anything can happen between now and June 12th, and it certainly will happen. But what we are also being told is that a lot of people are advising the APC not to even contemplate, even attempting a consensus arrangement for the emergence of their presidential candidate, that everybody deserves the right to try and vie for this position that they've all been canvassing for, spending millions, hundreds of millions, I'm sure by now, all over the country. So they deserve the right to actually go to the polls rather than having people suppress their ambition in favor of somebody else.
Dr. Bati?
Okay. Senator Abdullahi Adamu, former governor, going to the president. Yes, I mean, this is how it's done in politics. He's going there to pay homage and also to say thank you to the president, who supported his emergence as a consensus candidate for the position of the chairman of the party. And here is the president also expressing his view and giving him his mandate. All of that is just, political niceties. But what is more important is to scale back and look at how Senator Abdullahi Adamu emerged. He emerged by consensus. And when he took over the reins of power in the All Progressives Congress, he made quite a number of statements. The first was that he said, he will imagine that people in the People's Democratic Party will be beating themselves. How did these APC people, how did they get it right? Because ahead of that APC convention, you will recall that there have been threats of litigations. There were actual litigations. There were fears, even within the party, that the convention would not succeed. That was on March 26. And then at the end of the day, Senator Abdullahi Adamu emerged as the consensus candidate with the support of the president, with the support of governors within the party. So he going to the president to present himself and to pay homage and say thank you is just routine political tradition. However, what is important is that when he assumed the reins of office, Senator Abdullahi Adamu made it very clear that he would try to reconcile the party. And that, I think, is the major task ahead of him. It's not the smooth transition from Buni to him. How is he going to reconcile the party? in about 12 states, the APC is divided down the middle. And ironically, Senator Abdullahi Adamu himself was the head of the Reconciliation and Unity Committee that went around those 12 states. He didn't quite succeed in all the states. So he has his work cut out for him. Now, shortly after that convention, we have been told that in some states of the Federation, some members of the APC decided that they would defect. And we have seen some high-profile defections into the PDP, for example. And we have also seen a serving Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, appealing to the ground troops in Kwara State to say that they should not leave the party. All of them should stay within the party to build the party. We have also seen, that kind of disaffection in other places, in Kano, in Zamfara, and elsewhere. So indeed, what is important to the new APC chairman is for him to be able to put the party together, to rally the troops, and to be able to move the party forward. And so when the president says to him that he has to be firm, it's just an euphemistic way of telling him that, look, you have to hold this party together. But he cannot do that without the support of the governors. It is a good thing that he emerged based on the support of the governors of the party, who were the main architects behind the consensus arrangement that emerged within the party. So for APC, how would they manage the fallout of that convention going forward? The other matter is about their zoning formula. They say they've adopted the zoning formula of the People's Democratic Party. The same zoning formula that the People's Democratic Party, their immediate neighbors, have abandoned, more or less. Okay? Maybe to get money into the coffers of the party or whatever. That's beside the point. But what are they planning to do going forward to hold the party together? The final thing is that the APC is the ruling party. Both the chairman of the party and President Muhammadu Buhari, they have an obligation as part of the legacy of the outgoing administration to ensure that they organize an electoral process in 2023 that is seen to be credible. And this is the whole point by Professor Wole Soyinka, who is already kicking about the emergence of Senator Iyele Omoshore as National Secretary of the party, and other persons who have raised questions about the APC. So on both sides, both for the president saying you must be firm, and for the chairman saying, oh God, don't worry, I will try my best, it's about the legacy. Because whatever happens in 2023 will be a defining marker for the APC administration and also for President Buhari himself.
I think we've overflogged the issue of the APC, and we've been able to adequately state that it's a party that is fighting its own internal problems. And you have these problems everywhere in the APC. And that's why some people argue when we said the convention will lead to an implosion. They say, oh, we came out successfully. But I remember, you can say truly you had a victory, but a victory can be a Pyrrhic victory. And that convention was of some sort for the APC. Because after the emergence of Abdullahi Adamu, all we've seen is the party disintegrate further. There's cordon queues in the party. People are upset. They're not happy. In fact, Dr. Bati was talking about Kwara. Lai Mohammed was making the appeal after those members had defected to the SDP. They were gone already. And those were his supporters in Kwara State. And we know what's been happening in Kwara. We know the infighting going on in Ogun. They've not settled the case in Ogun between the former governor and the incumbent governor. The settlement of that went haywire. In fact, both parties will not meet eye to eye. We know what is going on in other parts of the country. And there's another big implosion coming. The APC is sounding that note of consensus. Some watchers are saying if APC is not seen to be fair in picking its presidential candidates, you will have another gale of defections.
That for me is the issue.
People will leave.
Yeah.
And they are touting the way of consensus. Everybody is trying to go lobby President Muhammadu Buhari. Everybody's saying all sorts now, you know, showing themselves as a beautiful bride, doing the dance and play. Some people are declaring and counter-declaring and saying, oh, we've not declared, we've declared. Their posters are being seen everywhere. You know, all of that is just a calisthenic to dance in front of President Muhammadu Buhari so that they'll be the good bride. And at the same time, some part of the party is saying consensus because we want to get our way. The APC should watch it. The APC should watch it. It's fast becoming another case of probably what happens with the PDP in 2015. But while we talk about the APC, look at the PDP too. So the two top political parties are in a big quagmire. The PDP is set to shoot itself in the foot. And anyway, let's see how the neck comes out with that decision. All sorts of arguments being made. All of this boils down to selfish political interests and not the interests of an average Nigerian that will have to be paying debts for monies borrowed. Generations yet unborn. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. Now, when we return, we'll have Rotus, we have Micah, we have Adesua, we have Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Yes, let's take a look at the Asia markets first of all. And it was a very choppy session on Wall Street last night, so they didn't really have a lot to follow through on. And most of the shares actually gave up their early gains. Japan down about 0.1%. Hang Seng down about 0.5%. Basically, not a lot of direction from any particular shares or any particular market as it's actually happened. The real big one, I think, that people ought to concentrate on is Toshiba. Now, this is one of Japan's biggest companies. It's 146 years old as well, and its interests range from refrigerators to nuclear power generators and so on. And the thing is that now it's been through difficult times in the past, in resignations from its senior board and all the rest of it. One of the reasons for that is the fact that because of its size, it's very closely linked to the Japanese government. Anyway, Bain Capital is the one that's in the driving seat about this, but they have just set up a committee to look at other bids actually coming in for it. So there may be a lot of change there, not immediately. I'm going to turn your attention to Sri Lanka just for a moment, one of those nations of which before the pandemic a great deal of hope in terms of economic growth. That's actually not happening now. And the lack of dollars, the lack of foreign exchange because they're not able to export their normal clothing, some because of lack of fuel, etc. It's all a rather dark circle as far as their economy is concerned. It's the worst financial crisis in decades. It's worth just monitoring that as well as another one of those nations and see how it manages, let's hope, to climb out of its pandemic blues. As far as the US is concerned, I did say it was a fairly choppy session yesterday. They were actually trying to digest what had been happening in the United States and what the Fed was actually doing. Well, we know what the Fed's doing. Of course, it's tightening. But I think a lot of investors were wondering how that would affect their particular portfolios and so on. Europe, again, did not offer an enormous amount of guidance yesterday. Futures are up about 2 points. Now, the US also, the Congress voted to increase sanctions on Russia on gas imports as well. And they've also noticed Microsoft has been saying that it's discovered cyber espionage from Russian-backed hackers trying to get into US and EU government institutions. Major stock indices not doing, therefore, a great deal in the United States. And it looks as though the week will just kind of filter out. Let's turn our attention to Amazon. We've talked about the union votes there in Alabama. according to the big union there, the Retail, Wholesale and Department Store Union, there's been interference by Amazon into that union vote. Again, details of that will arise. But the election at the moment remains apparently too close to call. So whatever happens there probably will have an effect on whether or not that union vote goes through. The EU, now, as you know, there are a number of large nations there which are unwilling to place bans on Russia energy supplies, and the coal ban has now gone back to a month, to August, as far as the EU is concerned. And approving these sanctions has been obviously a major challenge, particularly as far as Germany and Italy are concerned, two of the major nations there that depend so much on energy imports from Russia. The ECB also met yesterday. We heard a lot about the Fed, but the ECB, their minutes suggest now they will have, this is the minutes, they will actually meet together next week, but these are the minutes from their March meeting, and they show there's a terrific rift. She's got coronavirus, by the way. There's a terrific rift between members about whether they're not going to raise interest rates, how they're going to stop their bond purchasing program, and all the rest of it. They're still looking at inflation, which has risen to a record 7.5% across the EU. So a lot for them to get to chew on when they meet next week. But those rifts are getting wider and wider. So I think it would be fair to assume that the ECB will be wanting to get into the curve, right? Because they are clearly behind it at the moment, but into the curve of rising interest rates. Maybe that'll happen as early as next week. We talked a little about the UK energy plans, which came out yesterday as we were going to air. We know that it's about nuclear energy. We know it's about new licenses for drilling in the North Sea, of which more in a moment. But also the knock-on effect of this is that it's saying that there will be mandates to make sure that half of all new cars should be electric by 2030, and everything, petrol, diesel, finished by 2035, and mandates just as there are in China. As far as the Bank of England's concerned, they surveyed small businesses, and they found that most of these small businesses are actually expecting rising costs and lower sales. And UK, Manchester Airport, queues continue there. Queues continue at most airports. EasyJet, British Airways have cancelled flights over this upcoming holiday period, being warned by the CAA, which is the big industry figure, that the damage that is being done, that's being blamed on staff shortages and COVID and the rest of it, the CAA is having none of it. They're saying that what will happen here is that when people actually start to board flights again to go abroad and go on their holidays, they'll be suffering a lack of confidence in the whole of the airline industry. Now, back briefly to the new owners of Cambo. Now, this is an emblematic and very, very controversial oil field in the North Sea off Scotland. Scotland has been saying that it ought not to happen because of climate change, but that was before the war in Ukraine. And people are now looking at Scotland. Those with longer memories will remember the place as being hugely uplifted by a surge in oil exploration. That's expected to happen in the North Sea. The new owners of Cambo are saying that under them, this will actually increase. So overnight there, generally, oil prices sort of eased in Asia, nothing really to drive them. And that's really how we go into the weekend. That's the global view.
Michael, could this ease of oil prices be as a result of that announcement of a release into the markets? America said they were going to be releasing from their reserves, quite a number for the next 6 months. And the IEA announcement came in yesterday about 120 million barrels. So could it be as a result of that? And I'd also like to go to the Fed this morning. Yeah, the Fed is tightening now. But what's going to be the ripple effect of that tightening measure?
Okay, we've talked a lot about the Fed, haven't we, tightening? So let's do that very, very briefly. I still think the same is going to happen. They were clearly more hawkish in their minutes, which were released, the minutes from Wednesday, which we talked about yesterday. And I think it's on for a 0.5% rise in May. But we did see also the economy, if you take jobs being part of the economy, the lowest unemployment claim since 1968, as far as the concerned. So that's actually relatively important as far as the US is concerned. So all I can say is, looking from the outside, it looks as though their labour market is flourishing, and we haven't seen exactly. Remember, the US is the largest oil producer in the world. We haven't, and also they promised LNG supplies to Europe. So we haven't actually seen how the dust of this is going to settle. And as we're seeing, seeing the news reports this morning about the Ukraine-Russian war, this is the end of the beginning, as Russia starts to concentrate on eastern Ukraine away from Kyiv. It's far too early to be making judgments about what's actually happening. The Fed needs to be in the driving seat about inflation, and I still maintain, as I said yesterday, that I think that that investors, generally speaking, would like to have a central bank that is keeping a firm hand. It is clumsy, no question about that, but you give me a better way of beating down on inflation, and I'm sure world bankers would listen to you. But at the moment, it's about monetary policy, and it's about interest rates. So that's it. What was your first question?
My first question was about, the price of crude oil coming down. Was it as a result of that announcement of 120 million barrels added and the announcement from America?
Yeah. I agree. As I said yesterday, I do honestly feel that, it's a drop in the ocean. I mean, they even they talked about 180 million barrels. In fact, it wasn't 180 million barrels. It was minus 120. So the actual increase, because 120, because of what the US said it was going to do already and what the IEA is actually doing. So that combined effect, I mean, what it did was it was a message rather than a volume play, I think, rather than, and it may have caused oil prices to come down slightly yesterday, but generally speaking, remember, these are not what's actually going on in the oil market. These are spot oil prices measured on an index. There's no relation to where the oil is in the world, because nobody really knows, do they? As far as we know, there are still tankers circulating looking for places to dock as to who's going to buy the oil. And there are separate deals going on clearly with Russia. India, for example, has been doing this. India's been buying coal and gas and oil at cheap prices from Russia, because Russia may well agree to do a rupee deal with them. So it's very difficult to say.
Well, which is precisely the point. The Brent crude coming down by about 55 cents, and the WTI going down by about 44 cents. The question is, the consuming countries are claiming that they will release up to about 240 million barrels of oil per day. What difference will it make? Will it change the fundamentals, particularly with demand from China having gone down? And there is no indication that OPEC Plus will be motivated to increase output in the immediate term, one way or the other. But I wanted to talk about. About
all right. So here's
Canada.
the thing. So half the world's population, representatives of half the world's population, governments of half the world's population have decided that what they're going to do is remain neutral during all this. So that answers your point, doesn't it? So we do not know what the effects of it is going to be, because there's no clear picture of demand and supply at the moment, because we don't know, do we? I mean, this is the big problem, isn't it? We just do not know what the demand from China is going to be, which side of the fence they're going to sit. Are they going to try to reduce demand? Are they going to try to increase using coal in their energy? And so we just do not know the answers to these questions, unfortunately. Wish we did.
I was going to move on to Canada, where there is a real estate crisis, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau threatening to place a 2-year ban on foreign investors in the real estate market. Considering the fact that there are issues of affordability within the real estate market in Canada. And Justin Trudeau, one of his main campaign promises was to make real estate affordable. And now he's blaming the outsider. Is this a case really of blaming the outsider? Because foreign investors who are not permanent residents, who are not citizens, one way or the other, represent a very minor percentage of persons playing in the real estate sector in Canada. Is this a case of Justin Trudeau trying to play to the gallery? And what kind of impact, what kind of outcome does he expect? And finally, the flight disruptions. EasyJet, British Airways, Manchester Airport Managing Director has resigned. The two major airlines that I mentioned, they've blocked flights, and it's holiday season. For how long will this last? Or is it just about the holiday and the return to pre-pandemic levels in terms of travel figures?
Well, all right. Let's do the airports first of all. Yes, he resigned yesterday, and yes, as I reported, the CAA, which is the industry body, is saying to airlines like EasyJet and British Airways, this is not good enough. You should have been working with the airports. The airports are saying we can't compete with this because a lot of our staff are off with COVID-19, and so it's a perfect storm. And also, you probably will be familiar with that big motorway that goes from goes through the southeast down to Dover and down to the ferry port is actually jam-packed with lorries now, which cannot get on ferries because of the P&O problem. So there is a perfect storm brewing here. So that's that. I think longer term, you're absolutely right to question what's going to happen after this holiday period. I think there'll be a lot of reorganization because everybody will want to travel, everybody will want to get away. Everybody's fed up of the COVID restrictions, which have now been 100% lifted. I mean, look at Shanghai if you want to find out how people are actually behaving on 100% restrictions. Anyway, people will start to do that. Now, what will happen to the travel industry after this? I don't know. I think what they'll probably have to do, certainly airports will have to think very, very closely about their logistics. They are immensely complicated. I mean, you just have to go to a place like Heathrow to see the enormity of what they face every day. I mean, how they manage to run that place defeats me. But then again, I'm not in that kind of business. I think you're absolutely right. I think that the way to judge this is not now. It'll be horrible over the Easter period. There's no question about that. I think that, and this doesn't affect people coming into the country. This is us trying to get out of the country. So it won't affect it won't affect people from your country coming in. It's the other way around. However, that said, you're absolutely right to concentrate on what it means long term. Long term, I think there's going to be a lot of public anger and a lack of confidence, and therefore a lack of willingness when airports start to come to the state to say we want more investment. We'll be saying, but what did you do when the pressure was really on? Quite right, Sue.
Well, I asked you about Canada and the real estate crisis and the plan to impose more taxes on foreign buyers of real estate in Canada.
Well, all I would say to that is I absolutely agree with you. I think he is playing to the house. That's what he does. When in doubt, when you're worried about a domestic audience, start to blame people from overseas. It's as old as the hills, and it's not very edifying to watch, is it? What does Canada actually want? Does it want capital markets to stay open? Yes, of course it does. Does it want investment to flow either side of the border? Yes, it does. Does it want FDI, foreign direct investment into the country? Yes, it does. How can it therefore possibly ring fence the property sector? I wasn't aware that people were actually looking at, I mean, I could be wrong, I don't know, I'm not an expert in the property sector, but I wasn't aware that people were actually looking as part of their portfolios at Canada property. I mean, if he's trying to stop it, I would suggest to any investors to take a fairly close look at it, because the market has this terrible way of upsetting what politicians actually want to do.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Thank you.
Our dependable Rosa Sadiri is here now to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rosa.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. We begin, of course, we started yesterday with oil theft. Apparently, the Nigerian military has launched a new operation. It's called Dakata da Barawo, which is supposed to mean, don't be cynical, it's supposed to mean stop the thefts. Yeah, that's what it means. I just got it translated not too long ago. So they've also announced that 30 illegal refineries in the Niger Delta region have been shut down. They say this operation is supposed to reduce, the amount of bunkering that takes place. It's also supposed to, improve the environment, and also, the main thing is just to stop the oil theft. Mele Kyari, head of the NNPC Limited, has said that oil production is going to return to normal in the next 2 months. So it's supposed to rise from where it is right now. And so, we've talked about this extensively. The answer is going to be seen in the numbers. I think we have oil production. Let's take a look at, this was as of the fourth quarter. If you take a look at a chart here, you should see that oil production fell to, as of fourth quarter 2021, far right of your screen, 1.5 million barrels per day. So where are we now? We are officially in the beginning of the second quarter of 2022, right? We're in April. And he is saying that oil production should rise in a couple months. So that's June, April, May, June. So that's the tail end of quarter 2. So we should take a look in quarter 3. And we should now look at statistics from the Bureau of Statistics. And we'll take a look at that same chart and see whether or not oil production has in fact risen. So, Meleki Ari also said that oil bunkering is an elitist business, which tacks on to what Doctor was saying yesterday about whether or not there's any, ties between 2023 and the need to fund it. So that's also pretty interesting. So we'll hold him to that. We'll check the numbers in the third quarter of this year and see whether oil production has risen. As you know, we haven't reached our quota. Standard Chartered Bank put out a note yesterday, which is, let's take a look at that. So this is just, it's written by Razia Khan. You know Razia Khan, very popular, popular economist that works with Standard Chartered. Okay, so Nigeria reform hopes disappointed. This is an excerpt from the latest edition of their Global Focus. Accelerating inflation, security risks, and stalled reforms. Says we keep our GDP growth forecast about 2% or so unchanged, despite the boost from higher oil prices following the invasion of Ukraine. Nigeria's oil production has fallen behind its OPEC plus quota, reflecting years of underinvestment in the sector, the result of a weak price environment since 2014, regulatory uncertainty before the 2021 passage of the petroleum industry legislation, and a move away from fossil fuels. Even as OPEC plus quotas are raised, Nigeria's production may not recover quickly with its spare capacity in doubt. 2022 growth will be supported by non-oil sector. And then at the bottom, they highlighted, they're basically saying that the deteriorating security and security environment poses headwinds to growth. So insecurity in this country is, it's part and parcel with economic growth and has to be addressed. So that's from Standard Chartered. To Angola. Angola has become the second sub-Saharan African nation to tap the Eurobond markets, at least within this wartime, since the war in Ukraine began, after Nigeria. So if you take a look at some of the details here, Angola raised $1.7 billion. The tenure is 10 years. The yield is 8.75%. They're saying they want to get about 3 billion, 2.98 for the first quarter. So this is the first part. They're going to tap the markets again. What do they want to use the money for? They want to use it to pay back past debts. So they're borrowing again. They're borrowing again to pay back previous debt. It's, if I don't laugh, it is what it is, right? You got to get the money from somewhere. Angola has been in recession for 5 years. They just got out in 2021. This despite being the second largest oil producer on the African continent after Nigeria. It's amazing. So anyway, they're going to pay back the previous debts with this new debts. And I think it was Moody's or Fitch. They've given them, a stable outlook or so. They're supposed to, GDP should grow by about, 2.9 or 2.3, somewhere between 2.4, 2.9% this year. But Angola, they got their problems. They have their problems. Moving on to, I think it's Kenya Airways in South Africa. This is very interesting. Kenya Airways and South Africa Airways are getting together in order to seek investors for a pan-African carrier. So they're going on a road show, London, New York, and everything, to find a financial institution, not another fellow carrier, that will back a pan-African airline that will have hubs in hopefully Johannesburg, Nairobi, and I understand that they are also seeking a third member from West Africa, either Nigeria or Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire. And so the way it's going to work is that they will take it's supposed to be like a holding company structure. They'll take a minority shareholding, and then they'll see how it works. So, they've talked about how traveling within the African continent is very fragmented. A lot of airlines are not structurally sound. Ironically, two of those airlines which are not structurally sound are from Kenya and South Africa. So we'll see how it works over time.
So it's supposed to be a good idea on paper, this holdco structure where you put different lumps in and you get good investor. But I mean, it's Kenyan Airways and South Africa Airways. I mean, if it was Ethiopian, I was doing something like this. Oh, yeah, I'll look at it again and say, oh, it's Ethiopian Airline. But it's Kenyan and South African. So that's my comment about that. It's Kenyan and South African Airways.
Yeah. Are you suggesting that that's all that needs to be said about
That's all that needs to be said. Moving on, I hope this...
Operation Dakata
Dambrau.
Yeah, that's it. There you go.
Works. Because you see, we can have operations from now till infinity. But except we go after the real Barawus stealing oil in this country, we've not scratched the surface yet. Except we go after the Barawus that drive tankers out of this country, that still refine products, we've not scratched the surface yet. Except we go after the real Barawu, which is getting data to ascertain the amount of crude oil, amount of petrol consumed every day.
Yep.
And we can account for that. Then we've not tackled the Barawu yet. So there are lots of very high-class Barawus.
Like Kiari said it, they're elitist,
That, you see, the guns of the soldiers cannot flush out. So they are going after the low Barawus.
Right.
But the real Barawus are up there.
They're at the top.
Fight the real Barawus and we'll stop all the Barawuism.
Okay. Well, oil theft.
Yes.
This is a recurrent issue that we've been focusing on. And it's good to see that the military authorities have launched an operation, what they call Operation Dakata da Barawo. That is catch the thief. Barawo in Hausa language means thief. Okay, but already you have on the ground Operation Delta Safe, right? And that Operation Delta Safe, up to this moment, has not been able to address the problem.
Right.
So I don't think it's about throwing up nomenclature and about, describing new operations when even existing operations have not worked. Now, what they have told us is that 30 illegal refineries, have been identified. It's not as if they didn't know that these 30 illegal refineries existed in the first place. Okay? So the question is, will this be sustained? Or is this an attempt to impress the president that an effort is being made? Because you recall that the president gave express directives, particularly to the National Upstream Regulatory Authority, led by Gbenga Komolafe, to do something about this. And that particular authority said, look, they were working in concert with other stakeholders, and that investigation was being carried out and all of that. But even while not giving us a report on that particular exercise, we heard that the same Upstream Regulatory Authority was pursuing some rats in the upstream wing of it. Okay, so you find that the government is distributed all over, and when some people say government is overwhelmed, I think such persons have a point. This is what they point to. So we would like to see a concerted effort, a deliberate effort, particularly as, oil theft has resulted in disinvestment. Aitio, which is an indigenous company, is threatening to pull out of its Nembe Creek operations. Shell declared force majeure for Cados. Hess Oil and Gas, led by Tony Elumelu, said that in December alone, they suffered a loss of up to 97%. Austin Avuru, formerly of Seplat, said that out of what we produce, about 80% is lost. So it's a very serious situation because it affects revenue, as you have been told by the various stakeholders involved. However, Mele Kyari has been very optimistic. He says production will get back to expected levels. What gets stolen every day is about how many liters? 400 million barrels per day? Or is it 200 million barrels per day? Thousand, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That theft is not in the best interest of the revenue-generating aspirations of the Nigerian state. Okay? And he says that efforts are being made and we should all be optimistic that in a matter of months. But this is Nigeria. The thing that government does, whether it's PDP or APC government, is to give the people hope. And that's why all the official statements from the government end of it, whether at the federal level or the state government level, gives you hope And when that hope is not met, you become disappointed. So we are on all fours. We are all agreed that crude oil theft is a major problem because it has implications for revenue. Now, particularly that the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Committee, the RMAFC, has rejected the revenue allocation formula of the country, with the federal government getting a reduction in its allocation, with the states getting higher and the local governments getting higher. You will see that at both the state and local governments level, there will be plenty of long truth, thinking that more money will come. But that cannot happen until that proposition by the RMAFC with regard to the vertical allocation formula is taken care of. And all these people talking about revenue, it will have no effect if people continue to steal oil resources of Nigeria. And whether or not Section 161, Section 162 of the 1999 Constitution are reviewed. If the money is not there, Nigeria will continue to go borrowing. And so it is important for the APC administration, the Buhari administration, within the short period that it has left, to take crude oil theft seriously. And to go beyond that and ensure local refining. Not local refining in, what is that neighboring country? What is that country called? Is it Niger or Chad? Maradi?
Yeah.
Niger? Yes.
In
Niger, you go and set up a refinery there. Why can't our own refineries work? Okay?
They're stealing from them.
Yes, this is the question. Why don't we stop people who are smuggling even the refined products? I don't think that government is ignorant. Government knows what is going on. It is for government to summon the will to act.
Well said.
So much to say, but we've run out of time. I'll send you a message. I know you're dying to know.
Thank you.
Check your WhatsApp later.
See you later.
Now for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Omora is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa.
Just also received that message. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Dr. Abati.
Morning.
Well, let's take a last look at the COVID-19 pandemic toll for the week. As provided by the Johns Hopkins University tally, over 496 million infections have now been recorded since the first cases emerged from Wuhan in China over 2 years ago. At least 6.1 million casualties from this pandemic and 11 billion vaccine doses have been administered. We also have the latest data from Nigeria. 59 new infections and no COVID-19 related deaths were officially recorded and reported from Kwara, Lagos, Rivers, Cross River, Kaduna states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Now, the WHO says that by last September, that's September 2021, up to 65% of people in Africa have actually been infected with the coronavirus. Now, in a new analysis released yesterday, the WHO reviewed 151 studies of COVID-19 in Africa based on blood samples taken from people on the continent between January 2020 and December 2021. Well, it says 65% of people tested had some exposure to COVID-19, translated to about 800 million infections, in contrast to only about 8 million cases that were officially reported at that time in September of last year. And in trying to make sense of why the continent has been least affected by this pandemic, in that new analysis, the WHO is attributing the milder COVID cases on the continent in part to the much smaller proportion of people living with pre-existing health conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease. Meanwhile, health experts are worried over the failure of the U.S. Senate to include funds for the global fight in its latest pandemic package. The U.S. is the biggest contributor to the COVID-19 pandemic response, and according to publicly available information, the U.S. has actually delivered the most vaccines 500 million COVID-19 vaccine doses have been delivered to lower-income countries. It has also paid for numerous interventions, including mass vaccinations and construction of COVID care facilities. Well, experts now say that the lack of the funds from the U.S. will be a setback and could allow for unchecked transmission of the next variant of concern. Some of the countries that these experts named that could be impacted by this decision include Uganda, Zambia, Ivory Coast, Mali, Cameroon. And the areas of impact could be in testing, treatment, and health services in general. As you can see, most of these countries are in Africa. Back to you guys.
Okay, let me give quickly a background to what is happening in the U.S. That bill was passed on a bipartisan basis. Some Democrats had said they will not support the bill if it does not include international funding. But at the end of the day, there was an agreement on both sides of the aisle to pass it. But what was passed? $10 billion. It's about half of what was requested for. In the 2022 fiscal budget proposal by the White House, President Biden wanted $22.6 billion. Now, eventually, that was reduced to $15.6 billion, but eventually it was yanked out of the fiscal projection for 2022. And hence this whole process began when the U.S. decided that people could take second doses, four doses, whatever, And then, of course, at the end of the day, Congress decided on $10 billion. That component, $5.6 billion that was taken out of it was a component meant for international aid. And that is where the problem is. It draws our attention to one, vaccine inequity, two, the extent to which these members of the G7 and G20 keep their promises with regard to support for poorer countries of the world. The U.S. has a vaccination rate of about 66%. Poor countries, most of them, have less than 15% vaccination rate, even with regard to just one dose. And yet we have some of these developed countries, taking the fourth dose, the fifth dose. The danger with the United States are as follows. One, other countries in the G7 and the G20 may follow the example of the U.S. because the U.S. has been the leading country providing aid to poorer countries in Cameroon, in Uganda, in Malawi, even in Nigeria, where the U.S. had already provided up to about $540 million in terms of aid in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. But this is different from the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan of $1.9 trillion was meant to support families and businesses. This one, this $10 billion, is meant to just focus on therapeutics, on providing, materials for the next phase. But the big danger is how the international community has been shut out. And what does this tell us? It says simply that these developed countries, while they express interest in humanism, they are, at the end of the day, interested in their own people and their own country. And that's one message that the international community, the poor countries, should take from that. No matter what they tell you, they are primarily interested in the well-being of their own people. And it should be a wake-up call for countries like Malawi, Uganda, Nigeria, South Africa and others. Well, South Africa has done much better in Africa than other countries, to realize that your leadership should be more forward-looking rather than waiting for aid. So USAID may not be able to give you more support now that that $5.6 billion has been taken out by Congress.